On the morning of January 15th, 1947 in Los Angeles, Betty Bersinger was walking with her 3-year-old daughter. She came across what she thought was just an old discarded mannequin, but it turned out to be the body of a dead woman. Betty then immediately went to a nearby home and called the police. The discovery, though bad enough, wasn't the most shocking part. The body was severely mutilated. Brian Carr, a detective working on the case, said, "I just can't imagine someone doing something like that to another human being." She was found severed at the waist, scrubbed clean, and completely drained of blood, which explained the lack of blood at the crime scene. Her body looked as if it were posed. There were slashes on both sides of her face from her mouth to her ears, and she had several cuts on her thighs and breasts. According to the medical examiner, she had been dead for about 10 hours. Before the autopsy even took place, however, the police were able to identify the victim as Elizabeth Short. Her fingerprints were already in the system as she was arrested in 1943 for underage drinking. Elizabeth Short was living in LA working as a waitress with the hopes of one day becoming an actress. Sadly, that would never happen. Due to the nature of the crime, the media attention was incredible, and once the newspapers had the victim's name, they contacted her mother, Phoebe. The LA Examiner told Phoebe that her daughter won a beauty contest. After they dragged as much information out of her as they could, they told her the truth, that her daughter had been murdered. They offered to pay for her airfare so she could help with the investigation, but actually all they really wanted to do was just to protect their story. Where the name the Black Dahlia came from is unclear. Some say it was a nickname she was given while she was still alive. The last time Elizabeth would be seen was on January 9th. She returned home to LA from a trip with a man she had been dating, a 25-year-old Robert Red Manley, a salesman who was already married. Robert stated that he dropped her off at the Baltimore hotel. Elizabeth was supposed to meet her sister, who was visiting from Boston. Staff of the hotel believed that Elizabeth was seen using the lobby telephone, and that she was also allegedly seen at the Crown Grill cocktail lounge. Elizabeth would not be seen again until January 15th, when Betty Bersinger and her daughter find her body. The investigation was difficult due to the lack of evidence, but on January 21st, a person called the editor of the LA Examiner, James Richardson, and told him that he was going to turn himself in eventually, but he was going to let the police try to get him first. What's really disturbing is the person on the phone said to expect souvenirs of Beth Short in the mail. 3 days later, a manila envelope was delivered with words and letters cut and pasted from newspapers. "Here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow." Inside were Elizabeth's birth certificate, photos, and an address book. The address book had the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. Everything in the manila envelope had been wiped down with gasoline, just as Elizabeth's body was, to remove any possible fingerprints. The police did find out that the address book had belonged to Mark Hansen, but he gave it to Elizabeth Short to use. Eventually, he was ruled out as a suspect. January 26, the Examiner receives another letter. The difference this time is it's handwritten. The note states he will turn himself in on January 29th at 10 a.m. The police waited at the location, but the killer never showed. Later that day, another note arrived that said, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." Justified. The case went cold and remains that way to this day. Many people have confessed to the murder, but none of them are true. There were quite a few suspects that the police were looking into, but they eventually checked out, or there was insufficient evidence to pursue them any further. The number one suspect was Dr. George Hodel Jr. He became a suspect in 1949 after the trial, when known or suspected sex criminals were being investigated. Due to Hodel's shady history, which includes him being accused of killing his secretary in 1945 to cover up some financial fraud, and the fact that Hodel was a surgeon, the police believe that whomever dissected Elizabeth Short had some sort of surgical skill. In 1950, the LAPD bugged Hodel's home and he mentioned several things, but one thing he said is very odd. "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, They can't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary. That wasn't enough evidence to convict him of Elizabeth's murder, but it's very suspicious. The recordings have apparently disappeared, as the LAPD no longer have them. There are many investigators who believe that Hodel may have been the Zodiac killer as well, although there is no solid proof to back these claims. George Hodel's son, Steve, strongly believes that his father is the killer of Elizabeth Short, and possibly many others as well. All signs point to George Hodel as the Black Dahlia killer, but the case remains open as it's all circumstantial. I strongly believe that we will never know the truth, the full truth that is, and this will always be a cold case. Elizabeth Short's killer may never be known. Thank you for watching.